Nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past. Today's video is about nostalgia of basketball, and it's a start to a series I want to make talking about seasons that aren't talked about as much anymore. Seasons that have been a little bit forgotten due to time, or introducing seasons to new basketball fans. 2016-2017 doesn't sound that long ago, and that's the season we're going to be talking about today and in this new series. But it was 8 seasons ago. And for a lot of fans, they didn't get to experience this season and a lot of the fun that came with it. And this is the start of a brand new series in general. And instead of making an hour long video where I talk about this entire season as a whole, I want to start with the 2016 offseason and all the crazy crap that came with it. This is Son of a Sports. Let's get into it. One thing to remember before going into this offseason was Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and Tim Duncan all were looking at retirement. At least Kevin Garnett and Kobe were. In the middle of the offseason, that's when Tim decided he was going to call it quits. But these three legends were calling into retirement, and although Garnett was a little bit, actually way out of his prime and was not really a key rotational player anymore, the Timberwolves were going to have to look at a future without him, all set up with Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. The Lakers were going to have to look at going in an entirely different direction, and the Spurs had a new kid on the block in Kawhi Leonard to build around. But the biggest takeaway here is the Lakers really had to do something to move on after Kobe Bryant. Before we deep dive into the 2016 offseason, we have to look at the 2015 year as a whole. This is when the National Basketball Players Association formally rejected an NBA salary cap smoothing proposal that would have slowly brought in the money from the new TV deal into a bunch of off seasons instead of all in one. But the National Basketball Players Association declined it, and it was setting up for 2016's offseason to have a ton of money coming in. And it did. The salary cap spiked up $24 million, and the league was not prepared for it whatsoever. Let's start with Luau Deng, a player that averaged around 12 points for the Miami Heat the previous year and was not very efficient, was getting older, and his defense was severely declining. But the Lakers had a ton of money that offseason and missed out on a bunch of free agents that they were rumored to look at. So they signed him to a 4-year, $72 million deal that no one in the league was expecting him to get. This resulted in Luau Deng becoming the 33rd highest paid player in basketball, more than two-time Defensive Player of the Year Kawhi Leonard, more than NBA champion Kyrie Irving, and more than multi-time All-Star Jimmy Butler. Luau Deng the next year averaged around 7.6 points on 39% from field goal range, 31% from three, and an effective field goal percentage of around 45%. It did not really work out in the Lakers' favor. He was already 31 years old and showing decline. But the Lakers just had to deal with it and stretching that contract to, I believe, around 2023. The Lakers had another deal that they did for a lot of money. 4-year, $65 million deal to Timofey Mozgov, who was coming off an NBA championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers. However, he was not a rotational player for the Cavs at that point. He didn't play much in the finals, if at all. And he really just wasn't a guy that deserved to get top money in the NBA. Again, I'm all for players getting their money. It just didn't make sense for the Lakers to go and do that deal, and it actually didn't even work out in their favor. Mozgov was a throw-in a deal the next year to Brooklyn with D'Angelo Russell, a former number 2 overall pick, for Brook Lopez and a 27th pick in the 2017 NBA draft. It didn't really work out, and that pick actually led to being Kyle Kuzma for the Lakers, so that was a big win for the Lakers. Brook Lopez was also really good with them, and they didn't get anything returned for him after he left in free agency the next year, but he was still really good with them and helping the development of Zubac and other guys in that locker room. A signing that has been talked about for years is Chandler Parsons. He was 28 years old, and he was playing really good, effective basketball with Dallas and Houston. He showed a lot of promise, but the Grizzlies gave him a 4-year, $94 million deal. They had a ton of money that offseason, but Memphis is not a huge free agency destination, and there was just not a lot of talks to get big names. So they had to go get Chandler Parsons, and, well, it really didn't work out in their favor. After 3 seasons with the team, Parsons was traded to Atlanta in a throw-in deal for Solomon Hill and Miles Plumlee, and I believe Solomon Hill actually came back to Atlanta 2 seasons later. Parsons was just, he was always injured with Memphis. He's already said after his career was done that he disliked being in Memphis, and it just didn't work out. At one point, he was exiled from the team and not asked to come back. And I wouldn't say this is the worst deal of the offseason, but the Knicks consider it the worst deal in franchise history. And it's because Joakim Noah, on a 4 year, $72 million deal, barely played with him. His first year with him, he was fine. He really, really struggled from just showing any offensive production whatsoever in a new spacing league. And at some point, he just got hurt in like February and then April again and just was out for the year. In 2018, he barely played, and then for the rest of the year, he was asked to be gone. And after 2 seasons with the Knicks and only playing 53 games and 7 in 2017-2018, Joakim Noah was just waived and stretched for his last $38 million on his deal right before the 2018 season began, with 2 years left on his deal. I know I talked about free agency and some of the bad decisions that were made, and we're going to go back to free agency. I don't want to remain all over the place, but I need to get this out of the way too. The draft and some trades. Serge Ibaka was traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Orlando Magic for a former number 2 overall pick in Victor Oladipo, Ersan Ilyasova, and the number 11th pick in the 2016 draft, which ended up being Domantas Sabonis. Oladipo was not showing signs of progression as much in Orlando, and Ilyasova is a spot-up shooter that was going to give OKC more of an offensive potential. Kevin Durant desperately wanted that in OKC, and they really didn't have guys that could create their own jump shot and guys that could be spot-up shooters. Derrick Rose was also traded. Chicago elected to go in a new direction, surrounding Jimmy Butler with some more talent, and not keep trying to hope that Derrick Rose can return to his former self and hold off any more injuries, as it just kept affecting him more each and every year after 2012. Derrick Rose was traded to New York in a trade that brought back around Robin Lopez, a second-round pick, and I believe another player that really didn't have much to Chicago's rotation, but it was just Chicago's way of saying they needed to move on. And then we have the 2016 draft, and as you can see, there are a lot of names to remember from this. Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, Chris Dunn, Buddy Hield, Jamal Murray, Jakob Poeltl, Domantas Sabonis, Taurean Prince, and iconically, Denzel Valentine. Back to free agency, and one of the most iconic or, notorious free agency decisions of all time. It's Kevin Durant signing with the Golden State Warriors. And I know I didn't make it climactic. I made it really anticlimactic. I just got straight to the point. It was really big for this offseason. It was really big for the league in general long term, but it still affected a lot of dominoes that are still yet to be talked about. Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors changed everything for the NBA, and it's shaped everything that we've seen the last few years. We know what happened after he signed with the Warriors, but we need to see the little details that happened right after. To make the deal work and allow themselves to have enough cap space for Kevin Durant, the Warriors had to send out Harrison Barnes and Andrew Bogut to the Mavericks to open up just the little amount of room needed to sign Kevin Durant, which in that deal, Harrison Barnes also agreed to a more restricted free agency contract with the Dallas Mavericks. And looking back at that 2015 deal that opened up all this cap space, it was an unprecedented moment because the Warriors were allowed to have way more cap space that for a team that was 73-9 than any team that ever could get to that position. Stephen Curry earlier in his career had serious ankle injuries, and there was concern that he might not be able to make it much longer in the league until he popped out in 2014 with the All-Star appearance, 2015 with an MVP, and 2016 with the first unanimous MVP in NBA history. Then there's Draymond Green, who was a former second-round pick on a smaller deal because, well, he was a second-round pick. And Klay Thompson, who was a 3-and-D guy that didn't pop off until 2015. I think he made his first All-Star in 2016. I could be wrong. But still, this team had guys on smaller deals, and they had the money to go get Kevin Durant. Then there's the Al Horford deal. Al Horford was actually really close with signing with Oklahoma City and was going to do it if Kevin Durant stayed. But he was waiting until Kevin Durant signed and then waited a few days a little after that to negotiate with other teams and make the ultimate decision to sign with the Boston Celtics. And if you know recent memory, he finally won a ring with the Boston Celtics in 2024. And with Horford leaving, the Atlanta Hawks had a hole to really fill, and they looked at former Defensive Player of the Year, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, I believe, Dwight Howard. And he did have some character concerns with the Lakers and the Houston Rockets not being able to fit with James Harden very well in terms of personalities, that this was his last chance to really show that he could be the guy that could help a team on a bigger deal. The other really weird free agency decision that came this offseason was Dwayne Wade. The Miami Heat were not willing to give him the money he wanted, and he was taking pay cuts for years to make salaries work for LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and other guys. But now he finally wanted a max deal, since Miami wasn't bringing in the top names anymore, and Chris Bosh had to step away due to blood clots. And Miami just refused to do it. Pat Riley didn't want to do it. So Dwayne Wade took a bigger deal in Chicago to go home for his hometown team and play for a team that was moving on from Derrick Rose and trying to find guys that would fit really well with Jimmy Butler. And with the Bulls having a hole at point guard that they needed to fill, they looked at Rajon Rondo, a guy that had a rough year in Dallas and was fine in Sacramento, but still concerns of a personality that boiled over with Dallas and the Celtics. So they took a gamble there. Okay, moving off the key parts of free agency, because I wanted to talk about some of the things teams did adjusting going into the next year, because this whole thing is all about the 2016-2017 season. Let's talk about the Rockets and James Harden. James Harden was moving to point guard because Mike D'Antoni saw that he has the capabilities to do so. Everyone around the league considered Harden something like that because when the ball's in his hands, he's one of the best playmakers in NBA history. And D'Antoni runs a system that is called a heliocentric system, and Harden is one of the best heliocentric players ever. They just needed to see that. And moving him to point guard set the Rockets up for what would be a really big season that we'll talk about in that video. Signing guys like Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, and still keeping Patrick Beverley and trying to find shooters around Harden to build up a system of key offense. And the Bucks did the same thing with Giannis Antetokounmpo, as they saw that he had serious playmaking potential when they played him at point guard at the end of the 2016 season. He was 21 years old at the time, and everyone knows what he became. Like, I don't need to get into that. I will get into the start of what he did the next year because, well, Giannis is a huge talking point in my Eastern Conference video about this season. Okay, and that's pretty much it. That's a lot of the takeaways I wanted to get into from this offseason, a lot of the things I wanted to talk about. This was a fun offseason, and this whole thing is leading up to a season of a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to doing this series of Nostalgia Basketball, looking at this great season, the 2016-2017 season as a whole. I wanted to make shorter videos so everyone and anyone that wants to just come in and see the little things like the offseason or the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference or the playoffs or the finals, they can just come here and look at one at a time or go see them all as a whole. To those of you that are going to watch this, I don't know who ends up watching this. I really hope that y'all remember something too. Y'all can even drop it in the comments. This is Son of a Sports, and I will catch y'all on the next one.